time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
Once it comes from the players, then coaches can worry about strategy. And for 2 years, I've been worried about strategy. Everything started turning Sindarius' sophomore year. During that season, everything started turning. So for 2.5 years, I've been worried about coaching strategy, helping players improve. All of a sudden this year, I've been dealing with the other stuff. So that's why we're so inconsistent with strategy, because we're trying to figure all that stuff out.
Last week's one of those weeks where sometimes you work hard in life and it doesn't always pay off with wins. And that's a hard thing about sports. But our guys had great preparation in our practices and meetings all last week. I thought we competed extremely hard in both games, but we had a lot of basketball errors, and that cost us.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, here on a Tuesday night from downtown Columbia. Phil Kornbluth and Will Pelagic with you tonight. Professor Tom Hayes is away this evening. Our phone number, 800-956-7266. Email talkback at sportstalksc.com. On Twitter at SportsTalkSC. Got baseball going on here in Columbia as well as up at Clemson and some other spots as well. USC with a 4-2 lead on North Florida, playing in the bottom of the seventh, just left over there at the Founders Park area, and very nice day for baseball in Columbia.
Your first game over there this year, yes?
First time this year. Kind of weird seeing a bunch of different people in the dugout and on the base paths and in the coaches' boxes, you know, the new staff and all that. New guy in the SID seats in the baseball press box. Up at Clemson, the Tigers are rolling over Furman right now, 5-1 in the bottom of the sixth. We'll give you details on both of these games coming up and update other scores as well. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, USC basketball coach Frank Martin will join us. Gamecocks coming off very nice win, upset win over Auburn. And they have Georgia coming to town tomorrow night at 6:30. We'll talk with him about that. Kerry Tharp will be joining us at 7:30. Recap the big race at Daytona from over the weekend. More from Clemson coach Brad Brownell as the Tigers prepare to hit the road tomorrow night to play a big one for them at Virginia Tech. And time permitting, we could hear from the baseball coaches Mark Kingston and Monty Lee following their games today. So there you go with the lineup for tonight. You can join in as well. 800-956-7266 is the phone number. I guess the big story nationally today comes out of Louisville with the NCAA announcing that they will have to vacate the 2013 national championship amongst other penalties as their appeal of the 2013 investigation and the resulting penalties against them. That appeal turned down today by the NCAA Appeals Committee on Infractions. So it's upheld that initial ruling. You know, Louisville hammered itself pretty hard after the allegations became public, and they investigated it and pretty much threw themselves on the knife and sort of begged for forgiveness, and that was not to be forthcoming. So they're going to lose a lot of money, going to have to forfeit a bunch of wins, including the national championship and a whole bunch of other stuff.
So, the vacating of the wins, to me, is a bit of a penalty that kind of has very little base behind it. The big part about this is the money, and that's about $600,000 in revenues earned from the NCAA tournament appearances from 2012 to 2015 that they'll have to give back. And that's not exactly a check that's easy to write for a lot of these schools. I'm wondering if there could be even more punitive damages, you know, in the future for something of this nature, because, you know, we're looking at this being really the first basketball program that's having to vacate an actual championship. And, you know, we've seen wins vacated before. We've seen conference championships vacated before, but to have to take down a banner of a national championship at a place like Louisville that has the tradition that it does, you know, I don't know how you create a big enough deterrent for this entire situation, but maybe this is the start of it.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, this has been going on for decades. I mean,
Yeah.
schools break the rules through a variety of different ways. The NCAA investigates and they selectively punish. The problem with the NCAA for people like me, and I imagine others, is okay, so you do this to Louisville, you do this to Notre Dame. What about North Carolina? I mean, nothing the NCAA can do moving forward, since the North Carolina case was quote unquote resolved in their eyes, can be legitimate until they take action against North Carolina. Everything else they do, I mean, they're taking action against their member schools because that's what they sign up for,
right?
And they have nowhere else to go, and they have to abide by the rules of the NCAA and the infractions committee and what they hand down. But how the schools can sit there and take it like that while wondering, well, if you're going to make us vacate wins like your Notre Dame, and academics were part of the issue at Notre Dame, if you're going to make us vacate wins and things of that nature, what about North Carolina? I know I hate to keep beating the dead horse, but
you do beat a dead horse.
I think people all over the country in our jobs, every time something like this comes out, it has to raise the question, okay, but what about North Carolina? How could you recuse yourself, basically, is what the NCAA did, is what Sankey did as the head of the infractions committee when he said, we don't have any jurisdiction over this. When the NCAA has jurisdiction over anything to do with athletes and eligibility and being able to play in games and help your school make money and win championships.
Well, the NCAA is big on, rewriting its own rules as they see fit. I mean, you go back to it wasn't like they had anything that necessarily that they could go off of in the NCAA rulebook to punish Penn State on. It didn't stop them. I don't think anybody was going to argue that punishment wasn't warranted there.
Correct.
Unless you're inside State College and you're one of the sheeple that still worships at the altar that is Joe Paterno. But, and again, this particular situation kind of, I don't want to say it's related to that, but again, it's stuff that it's impermissible benefits, it's recruiting advantages, it's stuff that's very immoral, but yet isn't necessarily expressly given inside the NCAA's bylaws, which is a very thick book, by the way. It dictates everything between, whether you can put cream cheese on a bagel to a recruit on an official visit, yet, you can't write the darn thing thick enough to cover absolutely every disadvantage that comes about. And again, I'm not saying that it's incorrect for you to always bring up North Carolina in that regard.
Well, I'm going to bring it up every time.
I know,
and I think anybody,
and it's going to be annoying every time. But at the same time, it is a valid point. The fact that they didn't get anything basically against them when they basically ran a faux school outside of certain parameters.
Well, I mean, look at it this way: say you were a med student, a pre-med student at North Carolina, and you took some of those fake classes and got fake grades as a result that reflected on your credit hours and your GPA, and you get to the dean of the medical school and he looks over your records and goes, wait a minute, you took this African-American study program that was illegitimate and you have false grades on here that inflated your GPA falsely and your hours. You can't get in. You can't get into med school. We're not going to accept you.
There should be some sort of punitive damages involved.
My point is, if that would be the case, which I'm sure it would be, if it would illegitimize your degree and make you ineligible for that, why would it not do the same thing under the rules of NCAA athletic eligibility? You have to maintain a certain GPA and have a certain number of hours, and if you have fraudulent grades and fraudulent hours and fraudulent GPA points on your transcript, then the NCAA you fall under the baseline for that, and the NCAA should have ruled you should have been ineligible, and thus you play ineligible student athletes, and thus you should have to forfeit those games.
I will just repeat their reasoning, not that it's very good reasoning, but it's faulty reasoning. And the fact that it was available not just to athletes and available to all students is their reasoning behind it. I think it's a faulty reason, but again, that's the reason why they don't feel like they have jurisdiction in that.
You stop irritating me by stating faulty reasons, and I won't stop bringing up North Carolina every time a school gets hammered.
I'm just saying that's their reason. It sounds like a bunch of BS, but that's their reason.
Well,
and there's some clout to that.
All right, we'll be right back.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
Back we are, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, 800-956-7266 is the phone number if you want to join in on the program tonight. Comment on the Louisville situation. Of course, that's an ACC team, so it impacts the league. And updating the baseball over USC now, it's 4-2. Gamecocks over North Florida. They go to the top of the 8th inning. Olsen has a home run for the Gamecocks. Rowe with an RBI single. Olsen also with an RBI single. And in the 7th, a bases-loaded walk to Cullen. That accounts for the Gamecocks' 4 runs in the ball game. Pitching-wise, Gilreath started. He went 4 innings, pitched well, gave up a leadoff double. Outside of that, no other hits. He did walk 1. He struck out 4. I think that Mark Kingston will be happy with that. Bridges came on. He went 2 innings, gave up the 2 runs on 4 hits. He walked 1. Shook came in, gave up a couple of hits in an inning, struck out 1. And Dumarius is now in. He's gone an inning. He has walked 1 thus far. Clemson 7-1 on Furman. Tigers rolling here after 7 innings. They go to the top of the 8th. Funny thing here is, Nancy O'Dell?
Yes.
Nancy O'Dell?
Yes.
Big Clemson grad, very, very famous Clemson grad, and
yes,
very proud of it, lets you know at every opportunity. Her nephew started for Furman.
Correct.
On the mound in the ball game. Obviously, did not go extremely well for him.
3 RBI day for Chris Williams, 3-run homer, 4 RBI day, excuse me. I shortchanged him. He had a 3-run homer earlier in the ball game. They got 4 in the 5th, 2 in the 6th.
Yeah, Williams, the Tigers scored first with a sacrifice fly by Williams in the bottom of the 3rd to make it 1-0. He then had the 3-run homer in the 5th inning. And then Tadasio had an RBI single for the Tigers. And in the bottom of the 6th, Jolly, an RBI double. And Donathan, an RBI single. 7-9-0 for Clemson, 1-3-1 for Furman. On the mound for Clemson, Weatherly started, went 3 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned run, struck out 3, walked 1. Miller came in and went 3 innings and walked 1, struck out 2. And then the other Miller came in, went an inning. I don't know all their first names yet. He went an inning and did not allow anything across the board. So
Mitchell Miller.
Mitchell. I'm still
Ryan Miller and Mitchell Miller.
I don't claim to be into baseball until basketball's over. I'm sorry. It's just a bunch of scores until they play each other, until USC and Clemson get together in a couple of more weekends.
Upstate leading Winthrop 6-4. Charleston Southern a 2-0 lead on Savannah State. That's in the 5th.
All right. And Presbyterian is playing at Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt is leading 1-0, top of the 4th there in Nashville.
I don't know if did this come out during our show yesterday or did this come out before, but little shockwaves going through the SEC baseball circles as Mississippi State is now without a head coach, as you saw, I'm sure.
Yep, he was fired with cause.
Or they allowed him the opportunity to resign after the reports were that he was going to be fired with cause.
And what was the cause?
It's unconfirmed, but the supposition involves matters of the heart, involving his personal life, involving that.
Got his team to a super regional last year. Opened the season being swept at home by South Alabama. Not a good way to start the season. Apparently, I mean, I don't know if it was after that point that this information came to light, or did the opening up with 3 straight losses, did that play a role in the decision? I can't imagine that.
I'll read you the statement.
Fact that they lost 3 games to open the season after going to a super last year.
I'll read you the statement. I had a wonderful opportunity at Mississippi State, but unfortunately I made some poor decisions. I hope Mississippi State University and all the fans and people affected will one day forgive me. That is why the supposition involves possible matters of the heart.
Okay.
Involved.
And let's see what else is going on. The South Carolina Athletic Administrators Association announced its Hall of Fame class today. Very popular names on the list. These are all retired athletic directors. Jack Canty, Shell Dula, who's in about every Hall of Fame you can get in high school. Bill Johnson, Chuck Jordan. and Deborah Osborne, all going into the Hall of Fame. So congratulations to that group. Frank Martin coming up here at the bottom of the hour, and looking forward to having him with us for about 8 or 9 minutes. A lot of things we can talk to with him. Want to focus, of course, on how the team is playing and what he kind of thinks they can accomplish here the rest of the season. I mean, look, to make the NCAA tournament, they'd have to make a deep, deep run, maybe even have to win the SEC tournament. So I wonder how, after making the great run last year, how he's handling that with his locker room and what he's telling the players the remaining goals are for this year.
I think a lot of this has to stay linear for them. They can't look too far ahead. They're not good enough to be able to look ahead of any opponent at this point because they've performed admirably against good ones and badly against or performed badly against the ones that aren't good. So in that regard, you need to be able to keep your team focused on a daily basis. And like we talked about yesterday, bottle up whatever the energy was in the room when you had Sindarius Thornwell and PJ Dozier in for that Friday practice. I know that confidence that they got from facing those guys in practice on Friday carried over in on Saturday, but you walk around in that room on Monday and Tuesday, those guys aren't there. And you have to be able to ratchet up the kind of leadership. And one thing that he said yesterday, which I think we're going to stop down on him when he joins us here in a moment, is the fact that, when leadership comes from the coaching staff, that means that you have a team that's leadership. The less time he can actually spend on, trying to game plan for an opponent and find out exactly what tendencies his team can actually perform. And I think because of that, that's why things have looked so frustrating at times this year, and why the Gamecocks have looked almost like a team without an identity, because they don't really know how to play, because they don't know how to have anybody lead for them yet.
Busy schedule in the SEC tonight. You've got 4 games. You got Mississippi State at Texas A&M, Vanderbilt at LSU, Kentucky at Arkansas, and Ole Miss at Missouri. South Carolina, right now, if the tournament were today, they would be the 12th or 13th seed. They'll play Vanderbilt here coming up, so that'll break that tie. They're both 5 and 9 if they're still tied at that point. So right now, the Gamecocks would be in the play-in round of the tournament, so they need to get some more wins here to see if they can move up. They're only a game behind 3 others, Georgia, LSU, and Texas A&M. They can beat Georgia tomorrow. They'll have that tiebreaker with Georgia and would catch up with them and, of course, in the standings, move ahead. So, the best they can hope for, obviously, is just avoiding that play-in round on Tuesday and then having a game on Wednesday and going from there.
Yeah, we're avoiding the play-in round is good because it limits what you have to do for the rest of the week. But I think, again, anything that can get them a little bit of momentum going into the tournament would be good, because then that would limit what they necessarily had to do in Nashville. Because let's be honest, the NIT has to be the goal right now for this team. And if you would have told those who before the season had measured expectations, I would say measured expectations, given all that had transpired with this team between, Rothfelder not being available and all the guys you had lost, that is a reasonable expectation for what was basically billed as a rebuilding year for a team that was picked in the double digits inside the SEC. To get a team like that into the NIT would be anything short of a miracle coaching job from Frank Martin.
One game in the ACC tonight, Boston College at NC State. Of course, tomorrow, Clemson plays at Virginia Tech. Brad Brownell said today that Shelton Mitchell is out for tomorrow night, still dealing with the concussion from the other day. So that'll be tough on the Tigers. Virginia Tech is playing good basketball. They are 8-6 in league play. They realize if they beat Clemson, that number one, they'll pull even in the league with them, and then number 2, they'll have the tiebreaker because this is the only time they meet this year. So Clemson in a bit of a reversal here, having lost 2 in a row, going to try and go into a very tough place, Castle Coliseum, and see if they can break this losing streak and get a very important win. That'll give them 10 ACC wins, and at that particular point, they'll catch up with North Carolina in a tie for 3rd if they can get that win tomorrow night. When we hit the break, Frank Martin will join us here on Sports Talk. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back at Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network from Columbia. Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic with you on this Tuesday night. Professor Tom Hayes is off. He'll be back with us tomorrow night here on the program, updating the baseball. USC now 5-2 on Florida. They're in the top of the ninth, 5-10-1 for the Gamecocks. They've scored single runs in 5 different innings, 2-7-2 for the Ospreys of North Florida. And Clemson is up on Furman 8-1, 8-11-0 for the Tigers, 1-3-1 for the Paladins. They're playing in the bottom of the 7th. Clemson has scored 3 in the bottom of the 7th.
One thing that would concern me for USC, the 10 left on base mirrors kind of some of the ills from the weekend past because of what happened there. So
yeah, the clutch hitting.
In that regard, while they are leading and while they are 2 outs away from victory, makes things happen in that regard a little bit tougher.
Yeah, absolutely. We are waiting to hear from Frank Martin, who is scheduled to be with us at this point in the program, and so we will continue to effort to reach him, the USC basketball coach. The Gamecocks getting ready to play Georgia tomorrow night. Now, Georgia is an interesting story. They went through a big-time slump, I think, going into the season, primarily because of the return of Mayton, that the feeling was that they were going to be a real contender this year, but they sit at 15-11 overall and 6-8 in league play, but they have won their last 2 after having gone through a losing streak. And, you know, practically everybody in the SEC at some point or another this season has gone through it, maybe with the exception of Auburn. But Auburn got a taste of reality the other day in Columbia, as Frank Martin joins us now here on Sports Talk. Good evening, sir. Good to have you with us.
How are you? You doing all right?
Yeah, we're doing fine. Are you in the shower?
No, I just got you on speakerphone.
Okay.
I was just hoping you weren't trying to fit back into those Sassoon jeans you were talking about a couple weeks ago.
No, I did. They need like the jaws of life to pull me out of there if I cut those out again.
Well, it's good to have you with us, and I imagine the mood around your place has been pretty good since that win over Auburn the other day. What has practice been like since then as you get ready for Georgia tomorrow night?
Not bad. Yesterday, we were pretty sharp, and we're a little sloppy today. We're not as I don't want to say the word clean, but our focus wasn't as great as it needs to be. But you know, we finished practice better than we started, so we left in a positive frame of mind, and hopefully it's something that carries into tomorrow.
So you played Tennessee really hard and you lost close, and you played Auburn really hard and you had a huge lead and you ended up winning. So are you now seeing the kind of effort that you expect from one of your teams?
Well, over the last couple of games, yes. You know, you know, Phil, here's where we battled and we kind of took a turn for the South is when we lost that Mississippi State game. We didn't defend very well that game, and we got beat. And then when we got beat that game, then we allowed our feelings to get in our way. And if we allow our feelings to get in our way, then we're not going to be very good because we're not there yet from a maturity standpoint. We're not there yet from a talent standpoint, from a strength standpoint. So we have to be very, very clean with our emotions and our feelings. They have to be very positive. So then we can overcome any little deficiency we could have in all the other categories.
Mm-hmm.
But when we lost that game, we allowed that to bother us, and it took us a little while to kind of regroup it.
Which guy on your team would you say is the most improved at this point?
Most improved, as far as from beginning of the season to right now?
Yes.
Jason Cutt's gotten a whole lot better. Probably Frank Booker. Frank's come a long ways from the first day we practiced to where he's at right now. He's come a long, long way.
Talking with USC basketball coach Frank Martin. Corey Holden, now just to clarify for me, because there was the announcement that he was not playing anymore this year, and is he leaving the program? Is there any chance he will return, or is he going to be heading somewhere else?
He and I have not entered that conversation yet. He just needs to step away from basketball for a second and put himself, Phil, in a place where he can regain his mind as far as his body and how hard he wants to work at basketball, because of the injuries, he's going to have to work twice as hard as he worked before. And he's not playing at Delaware. He's playing in the SEC, and every time he lines up, there's a throw on the other side. So all those things put together, and the frustration with not being able to perform and his body constantly breaking down on him for the last 2 years, he just needed to catch his breath and not have the stress of winning, losing, of not playing well, whatever it may be. Just catch his breath, and when the season's over, he and I will sit down and talk again.
So would you say there is a chance that he could be back with you?
Phil, I just tried to explain that to you. I don't have that answer for you right now. I've spent an hour with the kid today, just trying to, help him as he tries to figure all that out. And at the end of the day, when the season's over, he and I got to figure that part out. We're not there yet in our conversation.
I know you try to impart, a singular focus on the team, worry about what's in front of you, only what's in front of you. But how much could this team benefit, especially the younger guys, from either an extended run in St. Louis or postseason play such as the NIT? How much would that mean to this team?
A lot. Just the ability to keep practicing and the experience of playing in the postseason. I mean, these kids, for the most part, have worked fairly hard. They're not, maturity, leadership, or things that I've talked about publicly that we're lacking in. But that doesn't make them bad kids. That doesn't make them less deserving. Just things that we got to get better at. So we're worried about playing well against Georgia tomorrow, and if we can figure that one out, then one way or the other, we got to play the next one, and then the next one, and then eventually we'll get to the finish line. And when it's all said and done, I hope our growth and what we've done is enough where we're given that opportunity.
This Georgia team had lost 6 of 7. Then they go into Gainesville. They beat Florida in overtime. Of course, you beat them in Athens. And, a win does wonders for any team that's been struggling. So I imagine that you'll be expecting Georgia to be at the top of its game tomorrow night, and especially getting Maton the ball in as many ways as possible. What are your plans in particular for him defensively tomorrow night?
Yeah, Maton's a handful. And everyone in the league has spent the last 2 years trying to figure out how to consistently defend him because he scores. He's grown his game. Now he can shoot the three. He can score over his right shoulder, over his left shoulder. He's a movement passer if you double him. So he's a handful. And Mark Fox, that is, does a great job of making his team play through Maton. So we got to be on top of what we do. We have to really be prepared to make him work for what he gets, and not give them any cheap ones. And the first time we played, I thought we did a pretty good job of that. We got a little sloppy with him on the defensive glass and gave him some offensive rebounds in the second half over there. We can't make that mistake. But we just got to make him work for everything. He can't get any cheap baskets or foul him and put him at the line where he's a very good free throw shooter.
Listen, we appreciate your time tonight. I know it's been a busy day coming off practice and everything. Good luck tomorrow night, 6:30 tip at the CLA. And look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Coach.
Thanks,
Frank
Coach.
Martin, USC men's basketball coach, talking about Maton. He's led the Bulldogs in scoring in all but 5 games this season. So
He's
he
big.
is the main man coming off a string of 20, 23, and 19 points. You got to do a good job on him if
Decent.
you're going to beat the Bulldogs.
Very decent.
Be right back.
The guys are always checking email. Send your comments or questions to talkback@sportstalksc.com. Now, more of Sports Talk from Columbia's Main Street.
Thanks again to Frank Martin for joining us here on Sports Talk, presented by South Carolina soybean farmers and their checkoff. Learn more at scsoybeans.org. Pork powered by soy.
I know you weren't trying to be too invasive with the Corey Holden, but I think we at least got a clear idea now of his status.
I mean, he to me, it sounds like there's a possibility.
Doors open.
He won't say that because a possibility means that they have talked about it, and obviously they haven't talked about it yet, but it doesn't sound to me like it's an absolute that he is leaving, or it's not an absolute that he will be back. It's just kind of somewhere in that
middle.
Yeah. So to me, when it's in the middle, to me, that means there's a chance.
You're saying that there's a chance.
You're saying there's a chance he will be back. So when you look at the
use that as a meme today, actually.
Did you really?
I did. I did that.
I just can't get over your creativity.
It was so good.
So you look at the Gamecock basketball roster moving forward. They have the two seniors in Booker and Myers, and then you've got Holden, Silva, and Gravitt, who are juniors right now. So you're looking at 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You're looking at 13 as it stands now. That includes the commitment from Jermaine Couisnard.
It's 13 without Holden.
That's 13 with Holden.
Oh, with Holden. Okay.
Yeah. 3 in the junior class, 3 in the sophomore class, 6 in the freshman class, and 1 commitment. So that's 13. So, something would have to be done to open up a spot if they were to sign somebody else. And, of course, they're still waiting on the NCAA to rule on Brian Bowen and his eligibility. That has not been resolved.
I say that one doesn't count on the 13.
No, it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Were you counting that?
Yeah. I count him in the freshman class.
Okay.
I'm counting him in the freshman class. So he's on scholarship, so it has to count.
Right.
So that is the situation that they face.
You're counting Felder as well, obviously.
I am indeed. Well. He's also on scholarship. So
this is, I mean, as we always say, these things are a way of working themselves out. But I think Holden for 1 year, you have to weigh whether or not you want him for 1 year, or whether you want somebody else you can bring in.
But we here in South Carolina have not seen him healthy.
No.
And, he sat out a year as a transfer. He had the knee injury. Then he has the hamstring. He's got to be he was a scorer deluxe at Delaware. You would think that healthy, he can help this club. And he would give you a guy, if he were to come back some way, he'd be a third-year guy in the program. So he would give you age, senior leadership along with Silva, and a guy who can score. I mean, I get it. I just it's the unfortunate part about it is that even after coming back, he didn't look like himself through the couple of games we saw him. Again, it's very, very limited action, but in my mind, you just look at this from the standpoint of thinking about the young man and thinking about his future, and maybe basketball is just not something that's in the future for him. Gone final in Columbia. Gamecocks beat North Florida 5-2. Sawyer Bridges gets the win. Eddie Demurius gets his first save. 5-10-1 for the Gamecocks. They leave 10. 2-7-2 for the Ospreys. They leave 5. Offensively for the Gamecocks, Hopkins had a good day with 3 hits, an RBI, including a double with 2 hits each. Campbell at the top of the lineup, and further down the lineup, Olson, who also had 2 RBIs, and he also had a home run. Up at Clemson, the Tigers are up on Furman now 12-3. Furman has plated 2 in the top of the 8th inning. 12-13-0 for the Tigers. They've left 9, 3-5-1 for the Paladins. They've lost 3, left 3.
One of the Furman coaches just got thrown out of the ball game.
Really?
Yeah.
Seth Beer, batting in the 2-hole today, has a couple of hits, scored a couple of runs, has an RBI. Cromwell has 3 hits on the day for the Tigers. The big guy, Williams, with the home run, he's got 2 hits and 6 RBIs on the day. Jolly continues to swing a good bat. He's got a couple of hits as well for the Tigers today. Let's go to Mark in Aiken here on Sports Talk. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Hey, Phil. I'm doing great. Thanks for taking my question. quick question for you on the Pitino side. Phil, do you see these shoe companies or anything like this down the road, maybe with some blowback, with the negative publicity and all that? Do you see them maybe curtailing their interest? I mean, I know there's a whole lot of money to be made, and even if the NCAA came out next week and said, okay, we'll allow student athletes to get paid a certain dollar amount based on whatever their prospective sport brings in revenue-wise or whatever, or any kind of scenario that they wanted to play it. But do you see any blowback coming from shoe companies or from somewhere in this whole thing? Because, I mean, you're not, no matter what they do, you're not going to stop these backdoor wheeling deals going on trying to get the 5-star guys coming in. I mean, they're never gonna stop this thing. So do you see anything like that happening from this? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate your phone call. I think we could see an attempt at legislation by the NCAA, but once all this is sorted out through the courts and through the FBI, and once all that investigation is complete, what they can do, I don't know. What they can legislate, I don't know. Schools today are partially reliant on apparel companies for the contracts of the head coaches. And that money, that augments what they pay in salary. Would schools be willing to cut those ties?
No.
And fork up the money some other way?
No.
Would coaches be willing to back off their salary demands and take a lesser salary that a school can pay, knowing that it's not going to be augmented by the shoe companies? I mean,
the apparel companies,
you got to do something. You got to do something to get all the different agents that play in recruiting out of it, if possible. Is it? And I might be just talking a fairy tale here. I don't know if it's possible to get all the hands out of the cookie jar when it comes to recruiting.
The apparel companies are the necessary evil when it comes to all this. And the problem is the apparel companies have multiple agendas. They not only have an agenda to sign schools, they have an agenda to sign individual players. And to basically take them out of the running there would be something limiting American capitalism, basically. You can't limit American capitalism. If they want a player bad enough, guess what? They're going to figure out a way to make that happen. There's no way you're going to be able to curtail that.
Now, look, yes, it is American capitalism, but American capitalists get punished all the time for breaking various rules.
But what rule are they breaking?
Well, we're going to find out here with these representatives of Nike and Adidas who are indicted. What kind of rules they have broken that could be impacted.
But what are you going to do to stop it? You can't do anything to stop it.
You mean from an NCAA standpoint?
Yeah. What are you going to do?
Well, listen, like I've said before.
You're basically asking them to adjudicate rules that are already on the books. Guess what? It's still going to happen.
The NCAA obviously does what it wants to. It can ignore it can ignore terrible academic crimes at a school and then hammer other schools for academic crimes. It can drop the hammer on you for social misbehavior by coaches and players. Like you said a little while ago, they kind of make up the rules as they go along here or enforce the rules selectively as they go along. Can the NCAA draw up a rule that says no school can accept money from apparel companies? Can they do that and enforce it? Why can't they?
Because they're too reliant on the apparel companies.
Well, I'm not saying that they're not, they don't need the money, but if they wanted to take the high road and take a stand and try and eliminate one of the areas of abuse, would they do that?
They wouldn't. They wouldn't do that.
Could they do that?
They could. It would be stupid to do.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you eliminate that.
Why would you cut off a revenue source?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You'd have to want to take a very high road here and prove to the public that yes, we're willing to sacrifice millions of dollars here to try to get it fixed and get it right because of the abuse that has come through the apparel industry into our industry.
The only way you could do that is ban individual companies from associating with the NCAA, which they're not going to do because they're always going to want to take a buck.
Yeah. This is true. That's what they have proven over the years. All right, top of the hour break. We'll be back.